Visual aids tonight for sure. And actually, most of you have already seen one, if not both, of the visual aids. However, you're going to see them in a little bit different fashion than you did last time, because there's more to add to what we learned last time. And it just so happens that Yah's word works that way. Okay? We continue to grow in the word as we continue to read the word and glean from it. So, let's start off like this. Who remembers what David talked about last night?
Parables?
I barely remember that.
Costa Rica.
That's true.
It was
That
the
is very true.
parables.
That is very true.
The parable.
All right. Yes, that's right. He talked about parables, and he told us basically what's happening is Yeshua was taking a natural circumstance, something that happened that everybody was familiar with, and he was teaching a spiritual principle through that. Now, not everybody can see that spiritual principle. That was asked by the disciples when they said, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" And Yeshua said, "You have ears to hear. You can understand. It's been given to you to understand the parable. It's not been given to them." Well, tonight we're going to look at one of those parables. Only it's not a parable of Yeshua. We're going to take another natural thing that happens, and then we're going to go back and we're going to look at something that Yeshua wrote. Okay? Which technically it is a parable. What Yeshua wrote, it is a parable. You've seen this before. It's 9 minutes long. We're going to watch it and then go through it. Now, this is talking about grafting. And this is what happens to us. We are grafted in, right? And Yeshua tells us he's the vine, we're the branches. And years ago is when I started looking for this, and I watched hundreds of videos before I found this one. And this one, I doubt, is 15 years ago he made it. And I doubt very seriously he was thinking about anything to do with the Lord at the time that he made the video. All he's going to do is show us, familiarize us with the process of grafting, what it takes to graft something into something else. There's rules behind it, believe it or not. Okay? You can't just graft anything into anything. So we're going to watch this video. Like I said, it's 9 minutes long. Do I have to drag this over, sis?
You probably do.
Okay. All right. Hold on, I got to fix a couple things here. I want the volume up right about there. And I'm going to drag this over here like that. And then go like this. And then go like this.
I want to tell you what grafting is. It's joining two plants together that are related, but maybe the one you're trying to propagate is the one that has some special quality. And it may be the only way to propagate a plant. That's the main reason for grafting. It doesn't root from cuttings, and maybe it doesn't grow from seed. These apples are a good example where you want an exact clone of the same plant. It's also a really good way to put multiple varieties on one tree if you're limited on space. You can have 3 or 4 different varieties of apples all on the same tree. The reason this time of year is so good for grafting deciduous fruit trees is because they're still dormant or just coming out of their dormancy. You can see a lot of the buds are swelling, and that's the perfect time to graft these trees because the sugar and water flows are just starting this time of year. They're pumping all these juice back into these branches, and it's going to make the grafting successful. It's also a lot cooler this time of year, so it's really important that the trees aren't going to be under stress because we're putting something together where it doesn't have a direct access to roots, so it needs to stay moist. And if you did this in the middle of the summer, it would probably dry out. On the other hand, if you're grafting tropicals, in the middle of the summer is when you want to do them because it's warm and humid, and that's what they want. So all you really have to do is decide where you want to put the graft. In this case, I've got a containerized apple tree, and I want to put multiple varieties on the tree. I want to put it somewhere sort of low on the branch, so all I want to do is sort of decide where I want to put it, and then I have my cut, and you can actually see in here, there's a cambium layer, and that's just simply the area where all of the growth starts. It's a little tiny green ring that's right inside the bark. That's what we're looking for. And so I know I'm going to put my new piece of sign wood is what it's called, but it's basically the tree that you want to propagate, and I'm going to attach that right there. So I've already collected some sign wood from the garden today. Now, as far as access to sign wood, you can get this from another friend who maybe has an apple tree you want. Maybe your grandmother has a really good apple tree variety you have. Or sometimes you can even go to a nursery and just politely ask maybe if they can have a little snippet of some apple tree they've got or whatever fruit tree you want. The key here is we want to match up the size of the trunk because they need to be an exact match. So I want to pick a piece of the sign wood that matches the diameter or caliper, that's a botanical term, so that these are going to blend really well together. So the first thing I want to do is get these sort of tapered down to size. So we cut that away because we really only need a piece 3 or 4 inches long. And by the way, these guys are all nice and sterile. Earlier, we took some rubbing alcohol and we just sterilized all the tools to make sure that there was no diseases on them, that they were just really nice and clean. It's really important when you're grafting. And we want to make sure not to touch any of these cut pieces because that's where the graft is going to take place and we don't want any fungus diseases there either. We're going to match these up and make sure that it's the same caliper. That's a pretty good match, so that's going to work really well. And then for prep work, we just want to make sure we get our sharp grafting knife and then just cut in the middle of the branch. This is called a saddle graft or reverse saddle graft, and you just push gently on it and it just opens up the branch just about the width of the blade, and you pull it away, and then all you have to do is get your sign wood and then do the same thing just in reverse. We want to take away material and sharpen this to a point on 2 sides, and it's really important that this be even and flat, and we're just tapering to almost just a point at the end, but just so that it looks like a reverse V. And you can kind of look, just keep going till it's nice and even. There, that looks pretty good right there. And you can actually see, we've got a nice V right there, and there's actually a good shot of the cambium layer in here too when it's cut on the diagonal. Then all we want to do is take this piece, maybe pry this one open just a little bit, and join those guys together. And we want to make sure that their cambium layers are matching up because that's what the critical point is. And then if you notice, this is a nice graft because the fact that this is pried open helps to push and close in on our sign wood, and that's where they're going to join together. And that's really what we want. Now, at this stage of the game, what we do is we want something to join these together to make sure they're not going to get knocked around. In the old days, they used to use these grafting rubbers, and this is nothing more than just a rubber band that's been cut and it's got a little bit of powder on it. And the way they did these was they just wrapped them around the cut and they wrapped it around a bunch of times just to make it tight. These are hard to find though. And then you can also use just electrical tape if you've got that handy. You just wrap it around the cut and you make sure it's good and tight. Disadvantage of electrical tape though is that it doesn't break down in the sunshine, and you have to make sure that you take this off within a couple of weeks or else it can actually damage the graft that you've got going on. Personally, I like using this stuff from the medical industry. It's called parafilm, and it's just sort of a wax tape, and all you really want to do is just cut a small piece of it. It doesn't really take much, and it's got a little backing on it, and it's sterile, so that's really good for grafting, and it's sort of stretchy. It stretches and opens up, and then you take that, you wrap it around your sign wood, and if you notice, this stuff, you just stretch it as you go, and you want to pull it tight, because we're trying to exclude air from this graft, and we want to make sure that it's just really tight and it's pushing down, and as you stretch it, it also attaches to itself, so there's no other fastener. It's sort of quick and easy, and the stuff's actually pretty inexpensive. You can get it online on the internet. And a lot of times you can get it from rare fruit societies too. And then the last thing we really want to do is just to make sure that this sign wood doesn't dry out. We've got a couple different options. If it's in a container like this, you can just put it in a shady area of the yard. That's going to help that this doesn't dry out. If it's out in the garden, You might want to put a plastic bag around this to make sure that the humidity level stays high, but you got to make sure it's out of the sun. So you might need to put a piece of shade cloth or something over it, poke a few holes in the bag to make sure it breathes. But one of the easiest things to do is to just use some of this paraffin wax. And you can get this in the supermarket. They use it for canning. And I've just used it on this hot plate that people use to keep their coffee warm. And I've just used some paraffin wax in here, and you just sort of paint it on your sign wood. And what that's going to do is that's going to help it from dehydrating. And you just go all the way up. You just go ahead and paint the whole thing all the way up to the tip. And the buds on the graft can go push right through the grafting wax without any problem. And this isn't so hot that it's also going to burn either, because it just sort of keeps it at that nice warm temperature of coffee. And you just paint it all the way up, and there's really nothing to it. From that point, it just takes about 3 to 4 weeks for it to grab, and you'll know it's mated if you start seeing these buds swell and start to grow. But you do have to be careful for about 6 months or a year until the wood really forms in there, and then you know you're good. And then you just can keep doing this multiply all over the plant. You can see I've already done it over on this one. So already I've got 3 different varieties on this tree. And the last thing that's really important is to label your grafts. So we want to make sure that we get a label on there, because it's really easy to forget where that graft is. And when you're pruning the tree in the wintertime, after a while you can't even see the graft, and it might be hard to remember where your grafts took place. You don't want to prune away all your good grafted varieties. So you can do that. You can just graft as many apple varieties on this as you want, and you can have this really cool multiple, they call them fruit cocktail trees, because there's so many on them. And it also adds to the advantage of the tree that you get cross-pollination on the tree, and usually you get better yields. It's a great tip for small gardens. The important thing to remember about grafting is that you have to stay within the same genus of plant. And the genus is nothing more than the first name of the botanical name when you see it on the tag. Unfortunately, that means that you can't run out to your garden and graft a great new hibiscus variety onto your juniper tree. But within the same genus, anything goes. And while I showed you only one grafting technique, there is tons more out there. If you're interested, pick up any book on propagation. They should have detailed lists of different types of grafts you can make. And hey, go online. There's great information there too. Okay, the only thing we need to do for our freshly grafted tree is to find a spot in the garden where it's going to be kind of shady and cool so that these grafts can take. In a couple of weeks, the buds will begin to swell and the graft will begin to grow, and that's when you can know that you can put it out in the sun. Remember, the trees out in the garden that you can't move to the shade, just shade those grafts with a little piece of shade cloth. That should be enough to keep them cool until they take too.
Okay, so that was kind of short and sweet. Rachel, come here for a minute. Maria, could you turn those lights on there, please, right behind you? Okay, I want you to fill that up with water, and when you go in the kitchen, you turn left, look on the rack. There's a big thing like that, a big jug like a pitcher. I want you to fill that with water too, and bring it up here, okay? All right, can I get somebody to turn those lights on too? All right. So now, we're gonna live through a parable like David was talking about yesterday. I want you to turn to John 15 in your scriptures. John 15.
John.
What are you giggling about?
Because I have to say Matthew, Mark, Luke, John.
Oh, all right. John 15. Let's pick it up in verse 1. Give everybody a minute to get there. You're already familiar with what this says, but I want you to look at it in light of what you just watched. Okay? Starting in verse 1, Yeshua speaking says, I am the vine and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As a branch cannot bear fruit of itself, unless it abides in the vine, neither can you, unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, bears much fruit. For without me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is cast out as a branch and is withered. There's a bigger one than that too. And is withered. And they gather them and throw them into the fire, and they are burned. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, you will ask what you desire, and it shall be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit. So you will be my disciples. Okay, so he's talking about, in that video, who played the part of the vine dresser?
The guy.
The guy did. The guy was the vine dresser, right? So, did you guys see the branch raise its hand saying, pick me? He chose the branch, didn't he? And why did he choose the branch? Did you catch that?
Because it was the same diameter.
Well, he needed the same size. to
That's
match it.
that he matched that down. But the reason he chose that branch was because of the fruit that he knew was in that branch.
Oh.
He knew the fruit was capable of. All right? So he took the branch because he knew the fruit that was capable of it. Paul tells us in Ephesians that in 2, verse 8, we're saved by grace through faith, and that not of ourselves, right? Lest anyone should boast. Okay? And then in verse 10 it says, we are his workmanship because we're created to do good works that were set before us before the foundation of the world. The gardener knows when he picks the branch what he wants to come out of that branch, or what has the potential of coming out of that branch. Okay? So now we know who we know who the gardener is, and we know who the branch is. The branch is us. Who's the vine?
Yeshua.
Yeshua is the vine, right? Did you notice that the gardener is the one that selected the branch, and he cut the branch to the size that he wanted the branch to be? There was some of it that he didn't need, right? He took what he needed to pull off what he was wanting to pull off. Everybody with me? Okay. Let's go through this one more time, because I want to point something out before we go any further. Who's the vine dresser?
Yeshua.
The vine dresser.
Oh, dresser. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Who's the vine?
we are.
Who's the branch?
Us.
Okay, now there's many of us, right? Okay. How do you know who the vine dresser is? From the story that I just told you. You know, I'm going to give you the answer to that. You know because you've been given ears to hear. That's what I'm telling you. You're understanding this natural thing that's happening. You're understanding a spiritual context to it because you've been given ears to hear. Just like the disciples asked with the parable of the sower and the seed. Why are you speaking to them in parables? To you it's been given to hear and to understand. So if you follow what I'm saying, it's been given to you to hear the parable. Okay? Now, he picks up the branch because he knows what fruit is in it. Each one of us is branches. Do we all have the same fruit?
No.
No. No. Are we all the same diameter?
No. Look around.
Nope. Okay? So he has to customize each one of the branches to the vine. Okay? Now, first of all, he took that big branch, the big piece of branch he had, and he cut it off. Now, I'm going to ask you, you can answer if you want, you just nod your head if you want. But when you came into this walk, were there things in your life that didn't belong in your life that he took away right away?
Yeah.
Okay, that's him cutting that off. But then he had to, when he had to whittle some more stuff down to get the branch ready. But the branch wasn't the only thing he cut, was it? Did he cut the vine too? Yeah, he did. Right? Custom fit for every one of us. Now, if you notice, he showed the tools, and the tools he used were sterile. I want to substitute the word sterile with holy. And what does he use to cut us? His word and the Spirit. Right? He uses that to work us down to where he wants. And then he fits us together. And then he wrapped that stuff around to keep the air out. I'm going to recommend that he's keeping the prince of the air out for that time. And at the same time, I want you to remember, he said you can't put it in a direct sunlight. You've got to protect it while it's young. But do you remember what he said? Well, let's go to this. Then he said you have to label it. Are we getting a new name? Huh. And do you know, after that graft has been in place long enough, it looks like the vine. You can't tell where the graft was at. And it's bearing fruit. Okay? Everybody with me so far?
Yes.
Now David taught last night on a parable. You just understood a parable start to finish from some guy that made a video 15 years ago and explained to us how that process worked. And Yeshua knows how that process worked. And when he spoke this, he was talking about the grafting process. Paul picked that up. He explains it to us. He doesn't mention grafting in here. But that is what this is talking about. He has to do all that stuff in our lives, okay, in order to graft us in, okay. So now you've been cut down to size and whittled and grafted into the vine and wrapped up. Party's over. It's a done deal, right? No, it's not. All of that was to put you together to give you the potential to bear fruit. But Yeshua's talking about this, and every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he's going to take away. Now, in that particular verse, I want to relate that to those at this time that were part of, well, we can actually say part of Judah at this point, even Judah, because they're part of him, all right? But they weren't bearing fruit. They got cut away. Paul tells us in Romans that they could be regrafted in. They could be grafted in again. But they have to get grafted in, And they're grafted in for the same reason we are, to bear fruit, right? And who's the fruit that we bear for? Is it for us? No. So when the gardener grabs that branch, each one of us, knowing the potential fruit that's in there, and he grafts it into the vine and expects it to bear fruit, he expects it to bear fruit for those around that branch. So all of us that he's put together, we have the potential of bearing fruit. And it's for those that are around us. That's why we bear the fruit. Okay. Now, every branch that bears fruit, there's still more that has to be done. He prunes it so that it will bear more fruit. You see, when it first comes on, he said, when the graft first takes, he said soon, it could be as soon as 3 weeks, you begin to see the buds. That's because what is in the vine, what is coming up through the vine, is making it into the branch, and it's causing growth. Okay? All right. The Father is glorified by us bearing much fruit. He's the one that cut the vine to fit us, the branch he chose and cut into, to fit. And he desires us to bear much fruit. But it's not a guarantee, is it? Okay. Step 2 of this study, everybody's got that, right? Everybody's got that? All right. Step 2 of this study, we're going to stretch it just a little bit, and you guys are going to work with me on taking a look at what it's like to be inside that branch. We're going to look at our innards, okay? As branches, we're going to look at our innards. This is us. Okay? Rachel, I'm going to need that other one to go with this one. Go. There's a bigger one back there. Go get it for me. All right. Now, we're also told by Paul in Romans that he chose Jacob over Esau even before they were born, where neither one of them had done anything wrong. Okay, right or wrong, so that it could be shown by his election, his choice. All right? So we're going to say that we got a newborn right here. This is a newborn branch. I'm going to mix and match tonight. Okay? This is a newborn. With water, please. All right. So as this person grows, little things begin to get in there. Selfish ways, sin. This is the inside of the branch, okay? All different colors. It mixes up. And you can see that it's dark. Now, when does he select us? He selects us when he wants to, right? But it's never the same for everybody. There's always a different stage in your life in which you're selected. Some of us were teenagers. Some of us were in our 20s. Some of us are even later than that. All right? But when he selects that branch, it looks like this. But he knows the fruit that branch has the potential of producing. Right? Yeshua said, if you abide in me and I abide in you, you will bear much fruit. How do we abide? Thank you very much. How do we abide in Yeshua? Yeshua is the Word, right? He said, if you abide in my Word, right there in John 15, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's several ways to do that. Okay? What if we read a little bit? Or we listen to a Bible study? The Word is being poured in there. We talked earlier this week about a relationship, prayer, meditation, reading, right? And when we're reading, are we reading once a week? Are we reading when we get together for Shabbat? Is that the intake we have? Are we praying here and there? Or do we do it twice a week? Maybe 3 times a week? He wants us to abide. And when we abide, even a little bit at a time, the bad stuff comes out. And those are the branches that those are the things that he has to prune as he's going. And we begin to bear fruit. And we keep abiding. We have that constant relationship. And you notice, it takes a while, doesn't it? How long does it really take in reality? Our whole life. Absolutely. The big stuff comes out first. And it's going to take a whole lot of time to get all that water to become clear. My point is, the abiding needs to take place daily, hourly. And there's times that you have to focus on other things. If I'm running a chainsaw, I have to be careful about what I'm doing. But you see, I've poured a lot of water into that, a lot of word. But you still keep learning. I know I've been in this walk for 30 years. I have not been in fellowship every single day. Takes a long time. 30 plus years for me. It hasn't been constant like this. It's been stopping and starting in times of study. The things it's pushing out let's look at it like this. Our will versus Yah's will. As we continue to fellowship, as we continue to pray and read, notice how much this jar of water, which is a picture of the branch that's us, notice how much work it's doing. You see, when this comes up through the vine and into the branch, it has to push this other stuff out first. If we do not allow, if we demand our will and our way, and we want things our way, we are, what the scripture calls, we are quenching the Spirit. Spirit's not going to fight with us. The Spirit wants the freedom to work. And is going to work in somebody that is committed to, what did they say at the base of the mountain? All that you say, we will do. Right? When we read about Ben-Hadad coming in on Ahab, he said, your women, your gold, all that is mine. Ahab said, No problem. He surrendered. Your will, not mine. Yeshua was in the garden. Your will, not mine. Sometimes there's things in our life that are harder to let go of than others. We all have those struggles. Especially when we've been walking in this walk for a while. And we don't want people to see the ugliness that we have. But in reality, anybody we're standing next to has got something that they don't want everybody to see that's ugly. But he wants us to share one another's burdens. He wants us to come together in unity, and he wants us to confess these things. In fact, we went through the mikvah today, but we're not always around the mikvah. We don't always have that mikvah there. But John tells us in 1 John 1 that if we walk in the light like he's in the light, we have that fellowship with him. And at that point, if we confess our sin, he's faithful and just to forgive us of our sin and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. That means we still have unrighteousness we're not aware of yet. Which brings me back to confessing our sin. When he brings something to our attention via his word, how do we react? I've shared my story several times with you guys about how it happened with me and pork. He told me, that's not food for you. But I just got it on my plate. Is there any way we can negotiate this? No. And I yielded. And I haven't eaten it since. Okay? When he reveals something to us, sometimes there's a wrestling match. We don't let it go right away. But the battle lasts until we let it go. So that's his desire. So there's one word that can sum up what we're to do when his word reveals something to us. What is that one word? Obey. Obey is what I'm looking for. Obedience. And even in obedience, because his ways are not our ways, even in obedience, it doesn't mean everything is all peachy keen and rosy. The apostles were obedient, and you can read about how it ended for them in the Fox's Book of Martyrs, can you not? It wasn't all peachy keen for them, right? They were getting beat up and put in prison for being obedient to what Yah said, right? So, but the fellowship with abiding in the Word and the fellowship with the Father, because of all that Yeshua did, that makes us to, if we're in that constant fellowship, when we're in that constant fellowship, I like to point everything back to Stephen, everything back to the scripture. Stephen was in that constant fellowship when they were stoning him to death, and he looked up and said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." Forgive them. Forgive them. You cannot do that in the flesh. It has to be done through the Spirit. This is what Paul's talking about in Romans 7 when he's talking about the things I want to do, I don't do. The things I don't want to do, those are the things that I do. Paul, when he came on the scene, how many know he had a lot of tradition with him when he first... Okay? He had a lot of stuff that he had to work through. It's real. It was a real fight that Paul was talking about having. And for us to yield to the Spirit is not an easy thing to do. But the commitment has to be made before the trial comes. You can't prepare for battle in the middle of battle. You can't get ready to be spiritually strong at the exact time you need to be spiritually strong. You have to have prepared for that. So what I'm saying is, the branch has a responsibility. The branch either allows the nutrition, that allows the Spirit to come from the vine, either allows it to come up from the vine and have its way, or it's blocking it because it's going to have its own way. Now I want to relate that to another parable that is the parable of the sower and the seed. And the only way I want to relate that is the third soil. In fact, let's turn there. Matthew 13. Matthew chapter 13. I'm just going to touch on this real quick, and then we're going to be done. It all ties together. Have y'all heard me say that before? Yeah. Well, we're turning there. I'll see if I can lighten that up a little bit more. You see how much it's taken?
I think you got happy with the blue.
It's not going to happen in what I got.
Well, sometimes he pours us out so he can pour more in.
That's true. He does bring us to an empty point. But my point is, it's a lifetime mission. All right. Picking it up in verse 18. Therefore, hear the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, then the wicked one comes and snatches away what's sown in his heart. This is he who was sown, received seed by the wayside. But the one who receives seed on the stony ground, in the stony places, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, yet there's no root in himself. I want to suggest to you that that is the ruach. The rock isn't there. But he endures for a while, for when tribulation or persecution arises, because of the word, immediately he stumbles. Now, verse 22. He who receives seed among the thorns is he who hears the word, and the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches choke out the word, and he becomes. Does everybody's scripture say becomes?
Yes.
And he becomes unfruitful. He had the fruitful potential. He had the fruitful potential, but it went away because he wouldn't yield. The things of the world were more important. So that's a look at us as the branch. And as we're reading the word, if the scripture gives us an instruction, if he points something out to us, we need to do something about it. Let me give you a recent example in my life. I've told you guys on numerous occasions I'm a news junkie. And that created a problem. Because if I'm paying attention to the news and what's going on, now I'm not talking about the mainstream media, forget them. I'm talking about, I go out and dig for it. All right? But if I'm doing that, I'm not spending time abiding. And I find myself being cranky. I find my stress being higher. So he revealed this to me several times. And the last time he revealed it to me, I said, you know what? That's it. I'm going to start reading books again, reading the word, getting out in front of this screen, and being washed by his word, and reading edifying books that are pointing me to Yah. Since then, some pretty cool things have happened because of that effort. And my stress has gone down. That's one of the really cool things that's happened, is the stress has gone down. So he expects us to bear fruit. He desires us to bear fruit, and he expects us to bear fruit. He's done everything he can. He's done everything except squash the self in us. That's up to us. He's even provided the Spirit that's going to replace the self if we'll allow it. But if we don't allow it, that's what it means when we quench the Spirit. Everybody follow me? All right, I'm going to stop there because it's 1:45 now. Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, great teaching.
It's a great teaching.
Visualize.
It's a great visualization. Praise Yah. Praise Yah.
You wanted to, show the colored water clearing up. Would you have it a funnel with a hose and pour it from the top, then it push the dirty water out?
Uh-huh.
Is it not the same way that when we got grafted in, that this branch is supposed to be bearing fruit, but when it feeds the sap from the tree, whatever,
Right.
it pushes the other old sap out, right? The one that is no good.
And that's what this is, but those are the branches that are just making leaves and not fruits. Those are the ones that the gardener has to come along and prune,
Yes.
so that we can bear more fruit. So that,
Right.
yes, exactly.
So it pushes from it.
Yes, it pushes it from the inside out, just like we did from here. Yes.
So what I'm saying is, first we have to be receptive
Mm-hmm.
to the word.
Mm-hmm.
Once the word's inside, then we can bring the fruit out.
He brings the fruit out.
Right.
We just be obedient to what he says. And in fact, the next study we're going to talk about what the fruit is and deal with some of that. Okay. But he generates. It's easy to tell when he's generating the fruit and when we're generating the fruit, because we're bearing fruit. We're bearing fruit all the time. Okay? But there's a way to tell what fruit we're bearing. That's a great point. Anybody else? God bless you guys. I love you.